Hello everybody, I'm Russ from Bednar's, and today we're here to talk about pollinator gardening. So one of the key factors of attracting pollinators to your garden is the plants. But another thing to consider is the other aspects of it. So what actually is a pollinator garden? It's a habitat that provides food and nesting areas for pollinators. So some examples of pollinators are birds, butterflies, hummingbirds, bumblebees, wasps, flies, anything that basically will spread pollen from one plant to another. So one thing to consider whenever you're planting your pollinator garden is the different bloom times. So one single plant is not going to bloom the entire season whenever you're selecting perennials. So you have to select plants that actually have a spring, summer, and fall bloom time to have that consistent food source for the pollinators. Another good tip for having a healthy pollinator garden is to not do your fall cleanups. So there's a lot of pollinators that will actually house themselves in the hollow stems of your perennials, or even in the debris and stuff that falls in the base of the plants. So don't do your fall cleanups. Let that stuff stand through winter, and then just do a later spring cleanup so those pollinators can make it through winter and survive to the next year without being disturbed. Certain pollinator plants are host plants. For example, Asclepias is a host plant for the monarch butterfly. So the butterfly will actually come and lay its eggs, and the caterpillar will actually consume the leaves for nutrition. So different butterfly species have different host plants. So doing your proper research, you can actually attract the butterflies that you want to see in your garden by selecting the proper host plants. All right, so I have a few perennials selected here to go through with you guys. And first up is Monarda, which is also a common name bee balm. Great long blooming perennial, usually starts early summer, lasts about 3-4 weeks, typically in that 2-foot range. And they get about 2 foot wide as well per one plant. Also, there are certain varieties of these that actually get some really nice fall color as well, into like the reds and purple realm. So, second up, Nepeta. This is a great plant. I have a bunch of this planted at my house. Different cultivars are different heights and sizes in these as well. Typically 16-18 inch range. A good tip with this is when it's done blooming, trim it all completely back, cut it back, and it will actually reflush again. So this is a sorghastrum grass, and this gets you about 5 to 6 foot tall and about 2 foot wide. So it's a narrow grass. It doesn't get really wide. This is actually really good for butterflies. So this is a fall blooming, it has a yellow plume on it, and it attracts butterflies. This is a phlox. This is an upright garden phlox. This is Gina. It has, the clusters of it they're smaller flowers, so it's bigger clusters, and this is a great attractant for butterflies as well. Over here, the Lanicera. This is gonna get you about 7 foot tall. It's not a very heavy vine per se, so you don't need a big structure to actually have it climb on. But this is awesome for hummingbirds. Spigella. This is a great hummingbird attractant. This is a little earlier bloomer, in that 20-inch range. Loves the sun. Eupatorium, otherwise known as Joe Pye weed. This is a later bloomer, so going into later summer into fall. Different cultivars are different heights. Some of these will get really tall. They'll get in the 3, 4, even 5 foot range. So pick accordingly with how much space you have in your garden. One of my favorites, this is Agastache. This is a very long bloom time. So it starts early summer and it'll last you pretty much all the way through the year. This is another one, if you keep it deadheaded, the longer it will bloom. Has a great fragrance as well. Last but not least, this is Russian sage. So this is a fall, this is a late bloomer. This is in the 2 to 3 foot range. Some of them will get into the 4 foot range as well. But another one great for butterflies and bees. So that's a few of the pollinators that we have here in the garden center. And there's also, to consider, there's also trees and shrubs that are in that pollinator category. And we're gonna get into those next. All right, we're gonna get started with a few selections that I pulled out in the tree and shrub realm for pollinators. First up is the Viburnum winter third. This is a shrub that's gonna get you about 6 by 6, maybe a little less wider than it is tall. White flowers, and then turn into like a purple, red to purple berry. The flowers are great for bees and butterflies. Next up is Cephalanthus, or the button bush. This guy's gonna get a little bit bigger. So in that 10 foot range, about 10 by 10, it actually gets a pretty large white flower on it, but that flower turns into a fruit that has a bunch of seeds that birds love. Next one behind me, this is Amelanchier, or serviceberry. So this is a decent sized tree. It's gonna get you in that 20 to 25 foot realm, and about 15 foot wide to 20 foot wide. Very early spring blooming. It has a white flower, and then it actually gets these berries on it that the birds love as well. Next one behind me is Heptacodium. This is also called Seven Suns flower. This is a small tree or shrub almost, also known as the crepe myrtle of the north. It has similar characteristics to a crepe myrtle, has exfoliating bark, and has a similar flower. Flowers start out white and then turn red, but it's a very late blooming, so it's nice to have that spectrum of the timing of your flowers, how I mentioned with the perennials as well. So having your spring, summer, and fall bloom cycles to cover all the bases. So next up is the good old-fashioned blueberry. You can see it has a bunch of berries already started on it. They do start off as a white flower, as you can see up top here. The blueberries, if you don't want to save them for yourselves, or at least save some for the birds, they really love them. This is an ornamental bush that you can use in a landscape. It actually has some nice other features, such as like a nice red fall color and exfoliating bark. They're in that 4 or 5 foot realm, depending on what cultivar, so they don't get super huge. Another good tip for the blueberry is to plant two different cultivars, so they cross-pollinate and you get a better yield. And then last up is the Fothragilla. So this is a very early spring blooming shrub. Gonna get you 4 to 5 foot range. Not very fast growing, but really nice fall color. But for the early flowers in the spring is what this is best known for. So the pollinators really like that this is one of the first things that blooms. So this is just a few of the items that we have here at the garden center. We have some really other good information rack cards that you guys can pick up and help you make your pollinator garden what you really want it to be. So hope you guys stop out and visit us soon.